Hello, this is Barry O'Carroll from Blanchardstown Library, part of the Fingal network of libraries, and I'm back with another interview, and this time it's with Fingal resident Finbar O'Carroll, and Finbar is going to speak to us mostly about his time playing football, mostly in the 1960s for St. Patrick's Athletic, and also being capped at youth level. But he'll also tell us a little bit about his life growing up around Stoneybatter and Finglas in the 50s and 60s. It's an unusual interview for me to do because Finbar is my dad. So without further ado, you're very welcome, Dad.
Thank you, Barry.
Okay, so look, we'll get started. You grew up originally in Stoneybatter, isn't that right?
Yeah, just off Manor Street. It was Kieran Street. There's cottages and a bit like the houses you see on Coronation Street. Yeah. And that give you an idea of and we were also referred to as cowtowners because of the cattle market. Cattle would be sold on a Tuesday, and a Wednesday, and they would be driven down through Manor Street. So thus the name cowtowners. If you look at some of the houses still to this day, you'll see little iron grids for wiping the cow dung off their feet, you know, and they still exist in some of the houses. You know?
And that was in Smithfield, wasn't it, the market?
No, well, the market was up off Ockram Street and Prussia Street. It ran into a V,
right, and
between that then, there's all houses there now. I can't think of the estate now, but there's all council houses there.
And I've seen the house you grew up in, and I mean, it's a small house, and there was 10 of you.
I don't know how we survived. The thing I couldn't believe getting a bed on my own where there was just one pillow, and you could, like our beds were, it was made up of both ends. There was pillows both ends, right, and there could be two on the top and two on the bottom, you know. It wouldn't be unusual to go to sleep stuck in your brother's big toe, you know. Like, it's quite common.
Yeah.
And but you're looking, we survived. That's the way it was. It was no different than lots of other families on the street, you know. Yeah. When you know no different, like there were good times and there were rough times, but like I had a happy childhood. I can't complain. As I said, like, the street was our playground, you know. Everything was done on the street.
And you told me once you had a bit of a nickname, didn't you, among the Dublin bus drivers?
Oh, well, not necessarily the bus driver. Anything. I used to be what was called scutting. So what you do is you jump on the back of a car or a bread van or even a lorry, and you'd literally just hang off the back of it, and it was called scudding.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my hobby. So they used to call me Scudder number one. And I remember one day I was actually scudding on the back of a bread van, and my father was home from his lunch. He was a cabinet maker, and he was standing at the door, like I said, like a Coronation Street, having a smoke. And I didn't realise he was there, and I was hanging on the back of the van as it was going up Kieran Street. And next minute I caught him in the corner of my eye, spitting out the cigarette out of his mouth and starting to run after so I hung on as long as I could, after the corner, and then I ran in around the cottages, and all the women were jeering, "Oh, you never catch him, you never catch him." And he never did, but I can tell you, I suffered that evening when he came in from work. That was the thing. Wait till your father comes home.
All right.
And you got a couple of wallops, and that was it, like, you know.
So you had a bit of a reputation in the area.
Well, that was, as I said, that was nothing unusual for anybody that lived. Like, we all lived in the back lane. Like all the games were like marbles, or you'd play, you know, in the mole it was called. You lifted up a little shore and you tried to get your halfpenny or penny into the little shore. And like, kids were very inventive then. You'd no choice, kick the can, you know, Relivio, chasing, and, you know, we used to actually, I remember we used to, and God, I'm just thinking out loud here now. I remember my parents never knew. Every so often, a circus used to come to St. Brendan's, which was the psychiatric hospital, Grange Gorman, and I used to watch from my back bedroom window, and when I'd see the flags flying on the top of the tent, I knew the circus was in town. So unknowns to my parents, I would say nothing, just go around where the colleges were, and there was a wall that must have been 15 or 20 foot high, because all the psychiatric units then, they were all enclosed. I think they said to keep the people out, not to keep the people in.
Yeah.
And I used to scale that wall, it would have been 20 foot, and get down the other side onto the bicycle shed that had a corrugated roof, go over to where the tent was, get in under the canvas, sit in there with all the other children that were obviously the children of the doctors and the nurses, and a lot of the patients were there as well. And watch the whole circus for nothing. Get treats, get sweets, get lemonade, come back up on the bicycle shed, over the wall, back to the house, and nobody was any of the wiser.
You never got caught?
Never,
Wow.
never.
Wow.
That was kind of things that, you had to be inventive.
I'm impressed anyway.
Yeah, and even like handball was 2 gable walls of the houses. That was another game. All these things, it cost nothing.
Yeah, and we've lost a bit of that now with PlayStations and all this kind of thing.
Well, there's no such thing as anything like that.
Yeah,
The highlight might be a GAA match on a Sunday, but you didn't even have to have a radio. You could go out and sit in the curb and you could hear it coming from all the other houses. The windows would be open and you'd hear Michael O'Hare's voice echoing through the street,
Speaking of which, you told me once about the first time you got a television. And what was that? You put the money in the back or something?
We got a slot television. Yeah. Look at Barry. We decided to get a television, and my mother decided to get this slot television. So what it was there was a unit on the back of the television, and at the time you put, say, €2. It was 50 cents or whatever. So you'd put €2 in the back and you'd twist the thing, and you get 3 hours viewing.
Right.
But what had happened was then you'd be watching something, maybe a football match or whatever, and then it'd just go bink. The money would have ran out, and as we say, the black dot. But what happened then was everybody had just leave the room because nobody was going to put €2 into it. Mm-hmm. So, but to cut a long story short, you'd get a rebate then, like what you used to have, like you wouldn't remember, Barry, but in the gas meters then you put in you got so much back if you used X amount of money surplus to what was needed. So what we used to do was, my mother would be waiting every month for the rebate. But what I used to do is I'd get my 2 brothers to turn up the television upside down, and I'd have 2 knives and wriggling out the money. And you'd hear the money and they'd be shaking the television. Like, it was unreal.
Yeah.
One each side of the television upside down. I'm on my back with 2 knives and get out as much as we could. And then when the man had come to empty the slot, he'd say, and would say, well, have you any? He said, no, you actually owe me money. He said, I couldn't owe you money. He said, I'm telling you, he said, somebody's been at that. I said, but it couldn't be. So he came back with another television and a different kind of box on it, an aluminium box. Said, this can't be tampered with. Of course, that was like a red rag to a bull. This was a challenge. So again, up at the thing and got out the money, and he came back and she was still waiting on her rebate, and he said, listen, I hate to say this to you. He said, none of my sons would do anything like that, he said, Well, he said, he took out a little plate and you could see all the scrape marks of the knives and he says, look, he said, somebody was at that with knives. So that was the end of the slot television. We went back and we got a proper television, as in you paid every week for it,
Yeah, wow, that's it. And yeah, no, they're brilliant. So I didn't know all the details of that story.
Oh,
that's brilliant. Yeah. And let's move on. Your mother obviously was quite well known. I mean, she was a TD. And what was like for you growing up with a mother who was and she was chief whip, wasn't she, of the Labour Party?
Yeah, it was good and it was bad, Barry. You have to remember now, 56. I would have been only about 8 or 9, and the thing I remember most about was I remember the day she was elected. Again, like I said, the street was our playground. And I was sitting out on the curb, obviously, playing marbles or doing something, and all these motorbikes kept coming. What they used to have then was telegraph boys. Now you have emails. But they'd come like with a little envelope, little green envelope, and it was like ticker tape would be stuck onto it. And it'd be very brief, like, congratulations, you've been elected. So these were coming left, right and centre. Every so often there'd be bikes coming, congratulating her, obviously, on after being. That's when I kind of realised something different was happening, because you kind of could tell from the street if something was happening.
And she was obviously away quite a lot.
Oh, very. I resented the fact that even before she was ever elected, she was never at home, like, she was involved with the Lower Prices Council, always campaigning for women's rights, for, education. She was out against the shops having control of everything, controlling prices and cartels, out to break cartels. Like, then you could only get all your school books and the likes of the educational company. and they had a monopoly then, so they
Yeah.
could charge what they liked. Same with the school uniforms. You'd have to go to Kingston's and O'Connell Street, and again they had no competition. Like they could charge what they liked. So she was out against that. Like she was way before her time, and like I'm pity she didn't live on to see the likes of Dunn's and Pennies and that, where you can go in and get your 3 shirts for X amount and all your different.
And she won that battle, didn't she? I mean, she managed to.
She did, but it took. She managed to break the monopoly, but like again, I don't know. It's wrong to say because she was a woman. She was basically paddling her own canoe, you know. Like she had tremendous opposition to a lot of things she was trying to do.
Yeah.
Like I'd move on to her political career, if you like. I resented the fact that she was never there. It's only in later life now when I have like stuff here that I have there that I've read, and I realise why she was never there. Because she was like a dog with a bone. She was just so engrossed in fighting for women's rights, for equality, for education, for the underprivileged, for the homeless. And like, so I suppose you could say she was actually blinkered.
Yeah.
And like we were very lucky because there was 5 girls in the house, so they actually took over as mothers. And then my father was a very good man.
Yeah.
And so like he was kind of way before his time.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, Eilish spoke to us a little bit about your dad, and of course I never knew him, and obviously he died when you were quite young as well. But I mean, Eilish told us a little bit. What are your memories of?
Again, you see, like the father thing, you didn't see much of them, and you hadn't got the father-son relationship that they hadn't. It wasn't their fault. It was just that it was very difficult in those because they were out working. You know, like it was 9 to whatever 5 or half 5, and then like they were getting you ready for bed, and he would be, because he had 5 or 6 of us to get washed and up to bed and make sure we got a cup of cocoa or a bit of bread with a bit of butter on it, you know, or margarine, whatever, like, you know. And so like I said, and then he'd work half day on a Saturday, so maybe Sunday was the one day you might just see it, and then there was so many to have to go around, so you were kind of one of a pack. It's the nicest way I can put it. Like he'd walk us down into town.
Yeah,
and,
you told us about that.
Yeah,
those
and
trips into town.
he was great with his hands, like in regards to keeping us amused, like in regards to making things. Like I remember one time, it sticks in my mind to this day, my mother had got this cheap clock in Cleary's, which was the big department store opposite Nelson's Pillar, which is now long gone, opposite the Spur. And he took the clock apart, and he wouldn't tell us what he was doing, but we were all sitting, I remember as kids sitting around the table, and he had one of my sisters cutting out numbers out of a calendar, and he had brought home this mahogany box, and he varnished up the box, and then he had a John Player tobacco tin, a lid off that, and he would cut out, don't know, at the time he wouldn't tell us, it was like a mystery game, it was just anything to keep us quiet and keep us amused. And then when all the numbers were cut out, he had a little compass, and like, you have to remember, this is a man out of school at 14, but he was able to mark it out completely on this box that he had made, like 12, 1, 2, 3. So in actual fact, he was making a clock. And he cut the handles out of the tobacco tin, you know, cut 2 hands and put it all together again, and it was an electric clock, and we had that for years, you know. So, and like, it was.
So he took a cheap clock and made something.
And actually made a lovely clock out of it, you know. And the numbers, as I said, were from the calendar, and he painted them kind of luminous, so they're used to shine at night when it was dark, like, you know.
Well, so he's obviously a very creative man.
He was very simplistic, but had fantastic hands for doing the likes that, like, you know, he'd always, like, he wouldn't waste anything. Like, if he found a piece of string, he'd find a use for it, you know, that kind of way. Like, he was into photography, funny enough, like yourself, Brian, in a big way. And because there's so many of us, obviously he wouldn't have the money. Like, the gear even then was very expensive. But, and as you know from the previous conversation, the house was very small. So he couldn't afford to have a dark room for doing all this developing. But he made, again, using the head, he made a box, big wooden box. It would have been maybe 2 foot by 2 foot, kind of big square box, and he connected gloves, like marigold gloves. Well, they weren't called marigold then, they were kind of that kind of glove, black. And then what he'd do was he'd do all his developing in that box and do his own. So he actually, I mean, it's such a pity, but we can all say this about our parents, there must have been hundreds of photographs. And of course, people say, where are they? And nobody knows, you know.
That's amazing. I never knew he was into photography.
Oh yeah, big time. Oh yeah,
that's
big
a
time.
big,
Big time.
So now I know where it comes. So we'll move on to, and your family history is interesting as well. I mean, your grandfather was killed in the War
Yeah,
of
actually, it's
Independence.
ironic because, as you said, my mother was a Labour TD, which is only in later life kind of had me slightly confused because all my father's people were Fianna Fáil through and through, and like they very active. There was 4 brothers and a sister, all involved since 1960 and rising. You know, Liam in particular, who I used to get on extremely well with.
And Liam was your uncle.
He was my uncle, yeah, and he was a commandant in the Four Courts
Right.
during the Troubles and was very highly regarded in regards, in again, all around Cowtown. He set up all the barricades on King Street, North King Street, and he was very high up in what they called in the old IRA, you know, and he would have been very close to, I can't think, it was Daly who was in charge of the Four Courts, and he was very, very active. And one other brother was over in Jacobs, and another brother I never realised was in a place called the Fort. It was called. It was actually the Tap pub at the end of Brunswick Street, and that that particular area saw an awful lot of activity during the 1960 and rising. You know, like if you compare that to Jacobs, where Jacobs there was hardly a bullet sent astray. Like, you know, there was little or no fighting over in Jacobs, but the Four Courts was bedlam. I'd say next to the GPO, the Four Courts would have been very prominent. And he was, when it was over, he was sent away to England, and he was interned over there. And as he said, they actually, it seems to happen, it's a common thing, they got stronger, the units. And I used to think when it was all over that, like, that was it, that, like, I never went into the history of it. I said, that's it, 1960. But then actually, even what happened afterwards when the Civil War started, obviously they were all on Dev's side, as I said, they were all Fianna Fáilis. And then because they were after the uncles, they lived in Manor Street. And
92 Manor Street.
92 Manor Street, yeah. I think there's a solicitor there.
There is
but
now,
they lived overhead. And my father would have been only 9 or 10 at the time. And the Black and Tans were always looking for the brothers, because the uncles, should I say, and particularly Liam, they always wanted to try and get Liam because they knew he was very influential. And from his record in 1960 and in regards to different, I won't call them terrorism acts, but various acts of, what would I call it? Rebellion. Not violent, but just kind of rebellion. But they knew they wanted him, and that was the main thing. But when they used to forever be calling to the house looking for him. And then one night my grandfather, there was a knock on the door, and he came down to answer the door, and unfortunately he was shot dead. But they reckon that he was
we know the name, a guy called Jocelyn Lee Hardy.
Yeah, so I believe. He was kind of what he'd be called, like, their equivalent of special branch.
Yeah.
Like, and seemingly there was a silencer on the gun, so when his wife came down, which would have been my granny, she found him there. But that wasn't the end of the story, insofar as they took the body away, and they thought then by taking the body away down to the Richmond Hospital that they wouldn't release the body unless somebody had come to identify it. So they were hoping that they might be able to nab one of the uncles if they'd go down and identify it. But none of them would, obviously. So they came to the house one day, and my father was there. As I said, he would have been only 9 or 10. And they took him down Manor Street to go down to identify the body. So imagine asking a 9 or 10-year-old to go in and identify their father who had been shot. But fortunately, his mother was on the way up, and somebody had told her what had happened, and she ran down. So before they could get into the morgue, she managed to stop them and bring my father back. And there was but in the meantime, as I often keep referring to Liam, who was fairly, he had organised with some ex-IRA individuals. He got up a group, and they were going to go down to the morgue and get the body forcefully and take it away. So when they got down there, they obviously were armed, And when they got down there, the attendant that was in charge of the morgue said, listen, there's no need for anything. He said, we'll just have to get permission from the British to release the body. So that was it. But even when it came to the funeral, they couldn't attend the funeral because they were afraid they'd be nabbed, you know. So like they had a rough time of it during those times, you know.
And that must have had quite an effect on your dad, you know.
It did to an extent. I never really, again, it's unfortunate. They never spoke about it, you know, in those times. Like the only thing I did notice with my father, he always had a tremendous shake. Like if he was pouring tea, you could see a shake in his hand. And I often thought to myself, and seemingly had a stammer in his earlier years. And I often wonder, was that the effect of the shock of, obviously I had to have some effect. Now I know in regards to the stammer, my mother, who had a great command of the English language, she managed to cure him of the stammer.
Yeah.
She used to get him to pronounce his words and take his time. So she seemed to be superwoman, you know, but she actually did manage to cure him of the stammer, you know. As I said, because she was involved in the politics and she had a very good education and she never boasted about the fact that she had the education. She kind of hid her under the rock, as some reporter once said. Maybe she would have been better off disclosing the fact that she had the education that she had, because I think she kind of felt we were in Cowtown and it was a very working class area, and but like she had great ability, Barry, because like when it came to writing letters, she'd write letters for people on the street, and whatever way she had of wording a letter, you had to respond to it. It was an art in itself, and a beautiful writer. Like it was like script. I always remember she'd finish it off with, is Michel a mass? I don't know why the bit of Irishman, I don't even understand what it is, but she'd finish it off with that and then her name. But whatever way she could word a letter, you had to respond to that letter. As I said, it was an art, and she wrote numerous letters and phone calls for people that needed help. And like one comes to mind now, I had an aunt, and her husband was, her mother and father. Her father was the driver of the train, and the engine of the train caught fire, and they had been living up just somewhere off Fiscal. It was houses there that CIE gave to their workers, and he blamed himself on the fire in the engine room, whatever, and he actually had a nervous breakdown. And he was actually, funny enough, he was in St. Brendan's, where I used to go to watch the circus, and she was telling me, she's still alive actually, she's 93, and she was telling me...
she lives locally, is that?
She did. She lived down just off... she lived in Coolmine.
Yeah.
And she was telling me that, she said, you know, my mother bought you your first pram because I'm a twin, as you know. And I said, did she? So she went on to tell me what happened was her father took a nervous breakdown and he was in St. Brendan's for X amount of months. They lost the house because he lost his job and the house went with the job. So they really hit on hard times. But her mother came up to my mother. They were trying to withhold money that she was entitled to CIE because he was out sick or whatever. But to cut a long story short, again, she worded letters and she fought her case and she got them something like £500 or £600 back money, which was a lot of money then. So as a gesture of thank you, she said she was only a child. She said she'd come up with the mother with a double pram up Kirwan Street, and she said, I always remember we got you your first pram, you know. But again, it was a little, again, that she was always trying to help people, and you know, where people that get bamboozled with the bureaucracy and form filling, and you know, they take, you know, once they were told no, they take that as an answer. She wouldn't. She'd be like a dog with a bone, like, you know, she'd keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. She just didn't like to see any kind of injustice. And she instilled that into all of us. We don't like to see an injustice, you know. She used to say it's morally wrong to keep your eye down and your mouth shut if you see an injustice going on, whether that be to yourself or anybody else. And it's actually caused me trouble at times.
I know.
As you know. But like, I don't regret any of that. Even if it did cause me trouble, I think I'd have a more troubled mind if I didn't do anything about it, you know.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating, because I'm learning a lot of things about me. I'm learning where they come from now. Photography and other things. It's fascinating. So I'll move back to you now. Maybe you worked in the Gresham, didn't you? And how did you get in there?
Oh God, there was nothing unusual. I tell you how we got in there again. The number 4 branch of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, they looked after all the catering staff in Dublin at the time, whether that be a waiter, a chef, front of house, porter. So the number 4 branch, you'd go down there and you'd get a card, and then they would send you to the different hotels, provided you passed the interview. So I already had a brother in the Gresham. He was training to be a chef. And
that was Jerry, wasn't it?
Jerry, yeah. Well, he had a nickname, Strawberry. And I'll tell you later why he got the name. Like, there was nothing unusual in the kitchen for nicknames.
Yeah.
Actually, it was probably nothing unusual in those days. Any man will tell you of my age. Nicknames were popular. And I went down with this card. I was actually to be a page boy, or what you call a bellboy, page boy. And I was in the office being interviewed, and I didn't realise, but the head chef was sitting in the corner doing something, probably writing up menus, and this manager was interviewing me, and he heard the manager saying my name, and his head popped up and said, "Are you Strawberry's brother, you know?" And I didn't know who Strawberry was, obviously, you know. I said, "Are you Jerry O'Carroll's brother, you know?" And I said, "I am, yeah." And he said, "Would you like to be a chef?" So there was no, like, I was only 14, you know, I was 14 on the Friday, so can you imagine, I was only just 2 days over 14. And I said, I don't mind, you know, that's the way it happened. And he said, I remember him saying to the manager, well, look, if he's half as good as Strawberry, he'll do me, you know. So that's how it actually happened. So on the Monday then I started off in the kitchen, which was good and bad. I never really liked the chef end of things. But like, there were a great crowd, great loyal bunch of people to work with, and it was good because it knocked the corners off you. It was hard work and great solidarity between the workers, you know. And of course, Jerry wouldn't give me an inch. Being my brother, he didn't want to think that he was showing me any favours. So any of the dirty jobs I would get, like, you know, could be whisking something on the gas range for an hour with the sweat pumping out of me. But like, he wanted to make sure that I wasn't being shown any favours to the extreme. And I loved the pastry end of it. But any of the other, like, really, I wasn't cut out to be a chef. But I just stuck with it because they had a great football team. And that, like, kind of kept me going. And
we'll get on to that in a few moments. And just any interesting experiences while working in the Gresham, or stories, or?
Well, as I said, nicknames were quite popular, and I always liked to.
Did you have one?
Funny enough, Finny. They used to kind of just call it Finny. I didn't, funny enough, which is unusual because, like, we had different. We had Joe Stitch.
Right.
And I say, like, how is Joe Stitch? Well, he was always cutting himself with the knives, so he was always getting stitches. So Joe Stitch, because I remember the phone rang one day in the kitchen. I answered the phone, and this girl, obviously his girlfriend, said, "Could I speak to Joseph Macmillan?" And I had to run around the place. Who is Joseph Macmillan? And it was actually Joe Stitch, you know. And there was another fella, Casper, they used to call him. You know, Casper the ghost, because he was as white as a ghost. He never had any colour, you know. So they used to call him Casper. And then there was another fella, like, he had a little bit of a speech impediment. We used to call him Mo Eggs. And I say, Mo Eggs, because when he'd be doing the breakfast and he'd get excited and he needed eggs, he used to say Mo Eggs. In other words, more eggs. So he was known as Mo Eggs.
And where did Strawberry come from?
Well, Strawberry, I tell you, when Jerry started as a 14-year-old, like myself in the kitchen, his very first job was taking all the green stalks out of the strawberries. And he was doing that, God love him, he was doing that for about 3 months. Nothing else, just taking the green stalks out, punnets of strawberries. Because there was a huge volume, like, you know. And one of the painters came down one day and said, "Where's Strawberry?" And the name stuck then, Strawberry. But like I said, there was loads of, like, another fella, Bocco, and that was, like, you know, Bocco the clown, like, you know, because he used to, whenever he had this appearance of being like a clown, his head was in a point. Whereas the normal chefs had to be rounded off, you know, and he actually had the glass eye. And, like, you know, like, it could be cruel, but yet you had to see the funny side, because you were working in that environment. Somebody say, "Throw your old eye on that Bocco," you know, like, it'd be a pot coming to the boil. And I can't repeat what he tell you, but, you know, that kind of thing. And I remember saying to one fella one day, I said, "Which one is the glass eye, you know?" Because he could be a little bit evil, you know. And I said to one fella, and I was being dead serious, "Which is the glass eye?" I said, one fella said, "It's the one with the most kindness." So that was it. So you had all these kind of characters, you know.
And you met some interesting people. There's some famous people, or you saw them.
Yeah, you were always at a distance. Like, you worked in the kitchen, you literally, it was like a bit like upstairs, downstairs. You were in the kitchen, you didn't go near the front of the house, as we call it.
And who were some of the people you might have seen?
Well, I saw the Beatles came through the kitchen, obviously, because they were doing the Adelphi. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Did you say Eisenhower once, was he?
Eisenhower was
Yeah.
actually the manager of the Gresham had a penthouse. He lived on a penthouse on the top of the hotel. Toddy O'Sullivan. I think there's a bar named after him now in the hotel. But himself and Maeve was his wife. But they were great friends of Eisenhower.
Oh.
So much so they had a little dog. Oh, he's one of these snappy little things, you know. And the dog was called Ike.
Right.
After Eisenhower, you know. And he was also very friendly with, sometimes I think he used to think he was a celebrity himself, Grace Kelly.
Right.
Yeah, she would stay a couple of times in the Gresham. And they were the kind of, Richard Harris.
Really?
Well, always in trouble, you know,
yeah,
get a few jars and and then a lot of the rugby teams would come over and stay. But possibly the Beatles, Eisenhower, there's probably a lot more, Barry. I just can't think of them at the moment.
And you would have seen them at a distance.
Oh, you just see them at a distance. Like Muhammad Ali.
Really?
That impressed me.
Wow.
Because he came down the back stairs and he had a few minders around him, and I said to myself, my God, look at the size of those minders. Next minute I seen Muhammad Ali and he was head and shoulders above them, you know. And he had a presence, like there's no doubt about that. The physique of the man, like he was just, and a really good looking individual, you know. I remember him very well. The Beatles.
And they had to kind of escape for the kitchen, didn't they?
Well, it was see all the crowds be waiting up at the front of the hotel, not realising some of the cute ones would be waiting at the back.
Yeah.
Because what we would do is, say when the Beatles were there, we'd put a coat over our head and run up the back thing and out the back gate and they'd be on, and just pull in, and then I can't use the words they'd say then and say that it wasn't one of the Beatles. Like just for the crack, because you had to break the monotony some way, like, you know.
And you mentioned then the football. So how did you get into the football?
Well, I played again when we moved from Kierman Street. We were actually, it was in reverse. We moved to again, it's always a story. We moved to what was called at the time Collins's Avenue Extension. It's now Glasnevin Avenue. And again, like the story attached to that was because the money was there, obviously, my mother was getting a good salary and my father was working and some of the girls were working. We moved to a nice house on Ballymon Avenue, just at the big roundabout. And they hadn't named the avenue. So I remember my mother telling me she went to a meeting and different proposals were given for different names. And somebody came up with the name Roger Casement Avenue. And she was in full agreement with that. I thought that'd be a lovely name. But it was shot down because somebody came up with the fact that he had homosexual tendencies. Now when you think of it now, but she lost they called it Ballymon Avenue. And of course then the history of it was all the flats and apartments were built. And they changed their name because they didn't want to be associated with the flats. So they changed their name from Ballymon Avenue to Glasnevin Avenue. But the ironic part about it was, when we lived on Ballymon Avenue, like it was fine, it served its purpose, there was a gang of us. But my mother took very ill and then she had lost her seat, so the money just wasn't there. So to cut a long story short, we actually lost the house. And we moved up to Finglas.
And you moved to?
Finglas West. And that's where my football said. We moved to, actually it's ironic, we moved to a house called Casement Grove. So it had done the full circle. And I often said to them, even to this day, they had no bother calling Casement Grove, Casement Drive, Casement Park, you know, Casement Road. No bother once it was up in the not so
wealthy part.
But like that was a great learning curve going up there because I had the best of friends up there and they thought I was a right little snob coming up from. They tell me like they taught me a lot of things and I taught them a lot of things. Like they'd say, because they were from the inner city, some of them, like, you know, they had knocked down Sean McDermott Street, Gardner Street, and they taught me things like that I never knew about. I can explain that to you later, but they used to said to me, say that again. Now say that, said we had the garage, and they would say, and they'd be around, no, say it again, we didn't quite get that. And I said, what's wrong? So we had the garage. Did you hear that? You know? And they thought this was amazing. So when we would go into town, I'd bring them into Bewley's in Grafton Street, and they'd get a sticky cherry bun and a cup of coffee. They'd never experienced this, and they thought that was brilliant. And but again, they were teaching me things like we'd go over to on a Sunday when we'd go into, well, it's Amy Street, it's called Connolly Station now. Like we wanted to go to Bray.
Right.
So one of the lads, he was like a sewer rat. He knew a way into Amy Street or Connolly, like through Sheriff Street, up through alleyways, up through arches, underneath tunnels, and we'd come out on the platform without having to pay. So the trick then was, when you got to Bray, we broke up and you tagged on to a family. So therefore, if there was a man with 3 or 4 kids, you went with them. Because they were so busy hustling them through, and it was like as though you were part of his family. Then when you got through, but they had all this kind of...
it worked out. Yeah.
It worked out, and it worked both ways. And like, would you believe it? We're still friends to this day.
Wow.
There's 3 or 4 of those lads now.
Who are they?
Well, there was Seamus O'Loughlin.
Yeah, I know.
There was John Long, again another nickname, Longer.
Yeah.
That was his name. There was Ray McCormick.
I know Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 3 that I can mention. There was another fella, Charlie Fahey, who you didn't know.
Yeah.
But like we would still be in touch to this day, you know, which is lovely, like, you know, because you're talking about 60 years ago. You know, yeah.
Wow. And so and did you play football on the streets then?
Well, it started off on the street leagues.
Right.
Like you had nothing like what you have now with, you know, the sport on television. Like I said, we had a black and white television, and for your sports results you'd get them on a Sunday, and like if you're waiting for soccer results, you'd have to wait till the morning paper the next day. Saturday maybe you'd get results coming in from England, like if you got a very late evening paper, they would be just typed down the side, like no write-ups, just the scores. Yeah. But that paper, you'd have to get that around 6 or 6:30 to get the English.
And you always liked Liverpool, did you? Was that when did that kind of...
Well, I was looking for an alternative to Manchester United.
Okay.
Because we're all into Manchester United,
right.
And I just said I'd go against the flow, and I decided to.
Was this before the Shankly times or around the same time?
It would have been around the same time as Shankly,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Like, and of course Manchester United were always a good team, and always had tremendous support. Still have to this day in Dublin, like, you know. So it's just for a change, really.
Did Bobby Charlton, George Best?
Like, we just picked the team, really. There was no sense of it being forced on you, or you had to do it. I mean, the lads I knocked around, Shea would have been Spurs at the time. Ray, the other lad I was talking about, was Chelsea. So like we all...
And you followed Shells as well, didn't you?
Oh yeah, big time I followed Shells. But that came through working in the kitchen. I worked with Paddy Roberts, and he played for Shelbourne. And we also played then on the same football team, the Gresham.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another story of the football end of it, like, you know.
And although you were a Shell supporter, you ended up with St. Patrick's Athletic, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I just take you back a stage, Barry, if you don't mind. Like, you were talking about how the football began. They used to have street leagues. So all the streets in, say, Finglas West, like Kildone and Casement, Mellows, all those roads, 2 or 3 roads would have a team, schoolboy team, and you'd play in the summer evenings. Now you're talking about 200 or 300 people be watching these matches, because there's nothing else. And when it came to the final, they'd actually have a roping off the pitch.
Wow. The
crowd would be that big, like, you know. So I actually started playing for Casement as whatever, 11, 12-year-old. And that's what gave me the interest. Then when the road league stopped, a team called Finglas Boys, and Mr. O'Brien ran them. These were great men, like, you know, because they were literally taking the money out of their own pocket. He had a little Aga Cooker van. And he used to bring the whole team. I don't know how we all fitted into the back of this van when we were playing away. Like, you might have to go out to Kimmage or Crumlin, and he would bring the whole team out. And like, you were paying nothing, and he would supply the jerseys, everything. Like, tremendous. And what we used to do was we put the big fellas near the door, so that when we pulled up and the doors were open, the big fellas would get out first, so that the other team would go, oh, jeez, look at the size of them, these are giants. So all the small little fellas like myself would be at the other end of the van, you know. You call it psychology in its own way, like, you know. It didn't always work, we got trounced. But that's how it started, really. And they were, and that family are still involved in football, the O'Briens and Finglas, tremendous family. And like, that was their life. He just lived for that, like, you know. And he'd kick every ball with you. Beyond the sideline, you could see him kicking his foot, and he'd be nodding his head, and you know, and like just
do it for the love of the game.
Do it for the love of the game, yeah. Tremendous.
And so what happened next then?
Well, then, again, the lads I was knocking around with, actually, as I said, they were townies, as we used to say. One of them said to me one day, you know, they're holding trials. He'd heard in his job that they were holding trials for St. Patrick's Athletics youth team.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say anything to anybody. I just remember going into town, just my boots, and I got 21. I think it's the 21 or 21, it doesn't matter. Up to Emmett Road. And I was looking for the pitch because it was in the most unusual place. Yeah. Like there was all this row of terraced houses. Yeah. I say, no, there couldn't be a pitch in there, but actually the pitch was in behind the terraced houses.
It's still
the same.
Day, yeah.
You can actually go, they owned one of the houses. You could go through the house to get to the pitch.
I've been in it with you, yeah.
And Harry Boland was the caretaker of the ground then, and his wife. And they lived in the house. They used to live upstairs. Harry actually played for St. Patrick's and he used to look after the ground. But so that's how that began. Then I went in and it was like a free-for-all. There would have been 20 lads there. I think Home Farm were the team they were playing against. So they picked what position did you play? So you told them position. So then it was literally a trial. They decided whether you were good enough or whatever. So I played and the score was irrelevant because it was just a trial. And then I kept saying, you must be doing all right because you're still on the pitch. A lot of fellas would be taken off, put on. Taken off. So I was still on for the full 90 minutes. Okay. So I kind of said, yeah, maybe that didn't go too bad. So then afterwards, he said to me, yeah, I want you to come up and play for the minus a grand. So I was still working in the hotel at the time. But I was playing a lot of hotel football as well. And I was very lucky about Paddy Roberts. I can't speak highly enough of him. He was the right half for Shelbourne. And during our breaks, the hotel hours are very difficult and very awkward. Like, you know, your break would be 3 o'clock to 5:30 in the day. So what else could you do? So I used to go up to the park with him and he started coaching me. Like it was somebody for him to kick a ball to, but then he started coaching me and teaching me different things, and he would have made a brilliant coach. So I was getting the benefit of playing for the hotel team, getting coached by him, as well as being up at St. Patrick's. So like 2 or 3 days a week we'd go up to the polo grounds. No, they wouldn't let you play in the polo grounds now because the ground was like a carpet because the polo people had money and they could get it manicured, you know. They don't allow football, but because of that time of the day, there'd be nobody around. So we would set up little goals and he'd be teaching me different things and how to kick a ball when it's moving and, you know, how to take a corner kick. And so actually when I was playing with him on the Gresham team, I feared him more than the opposition. Because if I went out to take a corner and I kicked the corner wide, there would be bedlam to play with him. He'd say, you have the whole pitch to put it into. Don't be trying to do the impossible, you know. And so that was the kind of thing. And like he would actually come up to you and grab you by the shirt.
And he played for Shells.
He did.
Because was it him who sent you a postcard from?
Yeah, I think I played Belenenses or one of them. I actually had got meningitis again through the football. I was with Finglas boys at the time, and I one Sunday morning we were playing out beside the church in Whitehall, St. Kevin's, we were playing, that's what it was. And I had hit my head off the post, I remember that. And that afternoon, again being football mad, I went back to the hotel to work and I was feeling a bit groggy. And I said, it's just a little bit of haziness. And I went up to Talca Park to watch Shells playing. Paddy was playing, Paddy Roberts was playing. And that evening when I went back to work, I really didn't feel well at all. And I said it, look, I just don't feel right, I don't feel well. So I said, go home straight away. So I went home. But the next morning, I remember, that was a Monday, and I had vomited and I had tremendous, like I just couldn't lift my head off the pillow, just like a big huge lead weight in it. And I just wasn't well at all, and a high fever. And my mother sent for the doctor straight away. Again, she was cute enough. She always, if you got sick, she kept it there to show the doctor. Something you wouldn't think of, but seemingly there was a method in her madness. But Killeen was the name of the doctor. He'd come up the stairs, and I remember he just opened my pyjamas and he just kind of drew a V on it. And without saying a word, he just latched down the stairs, straight on the phone and an ambulance. He had detected within that few seconds that I had meningitis. and the rest is history. I was carted off then in an ambulance.
Wow.
I was kind of coming and going, kind of like in and out of a coma type thing, you know. I could remember certain things. Actually, the one thing I do remember was, I could see out through the window, remember passing by Glasnevin Cemetery. Yeah, I know. And so I spent about 4 weeks in the hospital.
Wow.
And injections every day, and penicillin injections. And I remember I was given out one day to my aunt. I said I was fed up. I want to go home. I've had enough. And she said it straight. She said, listen, you don't know how lucky you are. She said, we're nearly sending for the wreaths and the mass cards for you. And that kind of softened my cough. I just said, well, look, back off now. So even then, like I used to get, Paddy was away playing for Shelbourne in Spain, and he sent me a picture of the football stadium they were playing in, came to the hospital.
That was a famous match, because it was the Portuguese champions, wasn't it? They went to 3 games, didn't
that's
it?
right, yeah. Was it Belenenses?
Belenenses,
Yeah,
I think they won the Portuguese
sure it was,
league.
yeah. They were one of the first League of Ireland teams to progress to the second round.
And there was an incredible crowd, wasn't there, in Dalymount for the third game? Were you at that?
I was,
You managed to get to that?
Yeah. Oh, huge crowd, like, you know. I mean, Dalymount was the headquarters for the international team. Like, there was no Lansdowne Road or, well, the Aviva now, as it's called, you know. Like, that's where all the big games were played.
Yeah. And then going back to you at Pat, you've very fond memories playing for Pats. I know you always speak about it in high terms.
Listen, I couldn't speak highly enough about St. Patrick's Athletic as a football club. I tell you, the first thing that struck me about it was everybody was treated equally. There was no distinction between first team player, reserve team player, or youths. You all trained together, drank your mug of tea after the match together. Great encouragement. If you had an injury, wherever you were on the queue, you were seen to, you know, they'd have masseurs and things like that. And just also the professionalism in regards to, like, they treated the youths the same as they treat the first team. Like, you go in, like, it was eye-opening. All your gear to be hanging up.
Wow.
You know, your nicks, your number 11, your socks, everything. All you had to bring was your boots. And in regards to football, you know, when you were playing a football, if you had a football, that was a treasure. Like, with Pats, to be 5 or 6 of them. And they just, like, and they were very, very, what way can I put it? They treated like a junior club, yet they had senior club status. That's the best way I can say.
And the pitch there was infamous, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, there was a tremendous slope on the pitch. What way can I describe it, you know? I'd say there would have been, they reckoned there was a 6-foot drop.
Wow.
So if you cleared off from one end of the goal to get it level, at a certain point you'd have to take 6 foot of the sod away to make it level. And even to this day, when I go to Richmond Park, I can still see the slope on that pitch.
Wow.
Don't ask me how or why. It's just ingrained in me. Like, the slope used to run from, I call it the Inchicore end down towards the Kilmainham jail end. That's the way the slope ran, like that, you know. So, you know, when you were playing, you wonder whether it was best to play up the slope or down the slope, you know, but you took weather into consideration. There was a breeze and various things like that, you know.
And it was while you were with Pats that you got capped at youth level for Ireland, isn't it? And again, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, it all happened so quickly in the one season, Barry. When I had gone back up to Pats then after the trial, your man said to me, I'd like you to be captain, which was a nice boost, because when that's honours put onto you, you actually start increasing your own performance in your own game, because you're there as an example. Like, automatically
expectation.
Automatically you start stepping up to the plate. So that would have helped me improve my skills. And then like, we were kind of mediocre, because it was the first time they had a youth team, and we were kind of a middle of the road, middle of the league type side, like, you know, get the odd surprise win against some of the good teams. But, like, the beauty of it was we were playing on the best of pitches. You know, you go up to Dundalk and they had good pitch, and, you know, out to Rovers they'd have good pitches, you know, like, always the best of pitches and the best of gear, as I said to you. Like, everything was top class, and good referees, you know, at that level. And like, just the way they treated you. And then one day the man that was in charge of the team just gave me, handed me a piece of paper to say that I was in the panel for the Republic of Ireland Youths. And that came as a bit of a shock. You know, it was one of these type of letters that it's standard letter, but it was just the gap to fill in the name.
Yeah.
You know, that type of letter, that's standard.
Default,
there's a word on it, I think. It's genetic.
Boilerplate. I think.
Boilerplate, and that was it. So then we went and trained up in the Boys Brigade ground up in the back of John Player's factory where they made the cigarettes. So the rest of that time was history. Then after that, then I was picked to play against England.
Over there
at in Oxford, yeah.
And what was that like? I mean, you flew over there, and what was the whole experience like?
The whole experience was amazing because, Barry, you have to remember, you're talking about, well, I felt bad in one way. There was about 18 of us training, and then they whittled it down to 12. And
there was only one sub then, wasn't there?
Yeah. And when I was on the plane, even then I thought, talk about injustice. I said there was about 6 or 7 officials, and I remember sitting on the plane and said, you know, this is wrong. Those other lads could have been brought, even for the trip. Because remember, you were talking about, I don't know if any of the lads that were on that team were ever on a plane before. I certainly wasn't. And maybe there's one that would have been, he was a bit bright. So
you didn't like flying too much at the time.
I wasn't gone on it, but the fact I was playing for Ireland, that smothered everything. I would have got up in a rocket, like, you know. And so that was basically it. I didn't like that idea that there were so many officials. And to be honest with you, the manager of the team and myself, the chemistry wasn't great between us. I just sensed it. But myself and the goalkeeper, for some reason, he seemed to just blank us, even in training. And, you know, I don't know why, but you look, that happens with all teams, all players. You know, there's difference of it. I mean, I don't think I was his kind of player. For whatever reason, but that didn't bother me. The fact was I was on the team.
Well, it obviously didn't bother you because you put the ball in the English net, didn't you, during the game?
Yeah, well, we were losing 2-0, Barry. We were 2 down at half time, and they were playing this 4-2-4 system. I'm not going to go into the statistics of it, but like it had us like kind of chasing shadows for the first half, and we decided in the second half then to go out and do kind of man marking, you know, and we started to come into it, and then I got a break and I scored a goal, and then we got a penalty, and that brought it back to 2-2. And we were very unlucky because with about 5 minutes to go, they broke away and they got the winner. But to come back with a 2-2 result would have been terrific.
And what position did you play in?
I was outside left.
And that's what would that correspond to anything now?
Well, what we used to call wingers, and I'm a great believer in wingers, you know, because I think they really make football very exciting.
Well, you've kind of gone back to that in a way, haven't we? In some ways, it's kind of the full-backs now are kind of...
In some ways,
backs,
well,
call it now.
You know, I think it makes for more exciting football. I think when you look through, you're talking about there, Bill Shankland, he always had wingers. Like, he had Ian Callan and Ian St. John out on the wings, crossing balls. There's no answer to somebody getting to the back line, crossing the ball in, and somebody running that. No defence in the world can handle that, like, you know, if it's done properly. And they kind of moved with all the different formations. You'd be bamboozled with 4-2-4, you know, 3 across the back, 2 in the middle, 4 up front, like 1 up front, 2 forwards behind. Where does it stop? Our formation was, I'm not saying it was better, but it was just a W formation. You had 2 full backs, 2 half backs, a centre half, and you had 5 up front. But the emphasis then was be 2 wingers. And, you know, I often hear people talking about say Manchester United when they won the European Cup after the Munich air disaster. And they talk about Bobby Charlton and obviously George Best. But like, I watched that match 2 or 3 times over. And there was a fella, because I like the wing play, as you can imagine, there was a fella called Johnny Aston playing on the wing for Manchester United in that cup final. And he was absolutely brilliant. He done everything right in my eyes that a winger should do. He never put a foot wrong. But because Charlton and Best were the big names, but I guarantee you get anybody to sit down and watch that match and watch Johnny Aston's performance in that game. It was stunning. And I also then discovered his father actually was in charge of the youth team. He was a coach to the youth team at Manchester United at the time. It was just one of those personal things said about wingers, like, you know.
And you've touched on it just now, but what do you think is the main difference with the game as it was played then and now? I mean, you kind of briefly mentioned it, but...
Well, as I said, the formation was obviously different, and all teams generally played to that formation. It was only in latter years, like, you know, and say 66 for the World Cup and that, all these different formations. As far as I was aware, and they couldn't come in before that. Like, to be honest with you, I got so sick of it that even to this day now, I look up a team and there's up as far as 26 or 27 numbers.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to
huge squads, yeah.
Talk as though I'm talking all, but when I was playing, it was just number 1 to 11. So everybody knew if you were number 2, you were right full. If you were number 3, you were left full, and so forth and so forth. And if you're number 11, you were the winger, or number 7, you were the winger. Number 9 stuck out because it was the big centre for the centre forward, you know. So that kind of, but in regard, like, the difference then was, now it's fantastic in a way because of the quality of the pitches. I think the football is a little bit lighter. I could be wrong there. It just, to me, anytime
the ball itself,
the actual ball, I think it seems to be lighter. Now, in saying that, the balls then used to take in the water. They used to rub a kind of a grease on it. It was called dubbing.
Yeah.
And this grease used to stop the water from penetrating the leather. And then the balls were laced.
Yeah.
And if it was laced badly, well, you could look out, because you would duck sooner than head it.
Right.
Because if a bit of that lace was sticking out, it could actually cut you.
Wow.
It could. I've seen fellas actually cut themselves where a little bit of the lace coming at them. And if it was laced badly, there might be a bump.
Yeah.
And that was like a stone hitting you, you know. Yeah. So nowadays it's just, there's no laces, as you know, the modern day football. They're all size 5 and they're the colours of the rainbow. Then they were just leather footballs, and they took on the water. So sometimes in bad weather it'd be very hard to kick. Really heavy. They could get very heavy. The state of the pitches, like, you know, look at the pitches now, they're manicured. Like, you know, you turn on your television, it's like a green carpet.
Yeah.
Go back and look at the old footage of the matches back then.
Even like, the ones I watched in the 80s, I mean, the pitches have been bits, like,
especially all around the goal mouth and the centre circle.
Yeah.
And but the quality of the pitches now, which is fantastic. And I'd go out and say, if you couldn't play football on those pitches, you'd never be able to play football, you know. And also the style of play is different, you know. To be honest with you, sometimes I'm astounded when I hear some of the money that they're on, which I would call just middle of the road players, you know. But look, that's the way it is, and it's an industry and there's big money in it, you know.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that in a minute, because but to go on from there, did you have a short stint with Bowes as well?
After Pat's, actually it was ironic, Barry, as I said to you, the chemistry between myself and the manager of the Ireland team, it just wasn't right. And ironically enough, he came to St. Pat's shortly after that.
Okay.
And I knew in my heart of hearts that the writing was on the wall. And sooner than being shown the door, I decided to leave myself.
Right.
And to be honest with you, Barry, at that stage then, it was getting far too serious. I kind of, what am I going to say? I remember playing for the first team, and I was kind of taking on an excessive sense of responsibility. Say, like, these people have to pay money in, so you're going to have to perform. And that kind of started affecting me, to be honest with you. And I was kind of getting myself very uptight and worked up, whereas it was more enjoyable when I was at the other level. So I basically enjoyed the lower level from an enjoyment point of view, and I didn't like, it was getting far too serious.
So the effect of that the spectators there had paid in, that actually had an effect.
Huge effect. See, you'd know sports psychologists then, you know, to help you through anything like that. Not too many fellas would admit that, but I believe in being honest, you know, that had a huge effect. Like, I was conscious of everything I was doing. If I had been just playing my natural game, I would have been better off. I just couldn't overcome that hurdle. And as I said, it was starting to get too serious for me. And then basically the mental strain of that was getting to me too. So then I decided to just turn me back on the whole thing. I went back playing junior soccer.
And were you with Bowes though at that point?
I just went up to Bowes for a couple of weeks. But again,
you didn't gel there.
No, I tell you, an incident happened, Barry, and I never liked it. What happened was, I think it was the second game in. Funny enough, it's ironic, I'm just thinking, their home ground was up in St. Brendan's, where I used to go to watch the circus. They had a pitch in the psychiatric hospital there, and I was in the dressing room. Actually, the dressing room, believe it was a cricket pavilion, because like in those days, the likes of the psychiatric hospitals like St. Edith's, St. Brendan's, they all had great facilities. Like, you know, they'd have rugby, they'd have Gaelic, they'd have soccer, they'd have cricket, they'd have tennis, they'd have handball alleys, like the great for the staff.
Yeah.
So to cut a long story short, I was getting stripped and I was just about to put on the jersey, and this fella came flying in and he said, I'll have that, and he slapped the jersey off me. And I said, there's something not right about this, you know? And I was waiting for the manager to step in, but he never said anything. So I just put my clothes on, I got dressed again and walked away.
Right.
Because I said, if that's the kind of situation that's allowed to pertain, I don't want to be part of.
Yeah.
I mean, straight away the manager should have stepped in there and said, excuse me, I tell you when you're playing, you know. But
And was there some interest from Millwall at some point, or some link there?
there was, yeah, like there was always rumours going around, but where you could never tell. Like sometimes they'd say these things to you, and again, being honest, you know, if you were playing down in Ringsend, which was kind of the home of football, rumours used to go around that there was scouts from Manchester United, or there was scouts from Southampton, or there was scouts, and I think a lot of the managers used to do that just to bring out the best in their players, to try and get them to perform, you know.
Okay, and just earlier we spoke about the League of Ireland, and obviously one thing I used to resent when you'd bring me to see Shells play is that you had an awful soft spot for Pats, and I used to be annoyed at that, you know, when they play in a cup final. You'd be, but like, looking at the League of Ireland, what any particular moments from the League of Ireland, watching it as a spectator to the years, that stand out for you?
Oh yeah, the one big memory I have of the League of Ireland was just prior to the World Cup in 1966. The League of Ireland used to pick basically the best players from the different teams, i.e. Shamrock Rovers, Shells, Pats, Dundalk. They'd pick and they'd have them represent the League of Ireland. So it'd be kind of a League of Ireland 11.
Yeah.
And this night in particular, Alf Ramsey, or Sir Alf as they call him, he brought over his England team. He was preparing for the World Cup, and they had a lot of their World Cup players on show that night, and the League of Ireland played, and the place was packed.
Dalymount, wasn't it?
In Dalymount. The place was heaving, and against all the odds, the League of Ireland beat them 2-1, and that was a great night, because not from the fact that we beat them, but that the League of Ireland played so well. Like the Tony O'Connell, again, going back to the wings, on one wing, he had a blinder. He ran rings around Jimmy Armfield, who actually played for England in the World Cup. And on the other wing, you had Frank O'Neill, who was with Shamrock Rovers.
And I played against Frank O'Neill
well,
one of your teams.
He was outstanding that night. And actually, Ronnie Whelan, that he looked after me now, because we were both from Finglas. Ronnie was with St.
Senior,
Patrick's.
of course.
Oh yeah, Ronnie Senior. Sorry, I meant to say that. Well, Ronnie Ronnie scored a goal that night. And Paddy Roberts, who was kind of coaching me at the time, Paddy was on that team. So it was a great night, and there was a penalty save. It had everything, but that was a great night for the League of Ireland. And see, as again, I'm going back, you had nothing else. All you had was your League of Ireland matches.
Right, and just before I move on to the last few questions, just behind you there, we could actually see the jersey that you wore, playing for Ireland there. It's there, and the cap. Do you want to show us the cap? It's just there against the wall, if you can grab that. Well, we can see it there, can we?
Here, I'll just show.
Yeah. And that's the cap there. And you got that a lot later. It was in Pat Dolan, I think, of Pat's.
Yeah, no, what happened was a lot of confusion. And again, no disrespect to the FAI, but things were handled very badly insofar as you had to apply for your cap. Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And not only did you have to apply, you had to mention some of the players you played with. And what was the result?
Wow.
Like, even in regards to the jersey, Barry, when we were coming back on the plane, they told us after the match they weren't giving us our jersey. Now, that's unheard of. You always got your jersey.
Yeah.
said they were going to keep it for the next match. Now the jerseys were mucky because it had been raining that morning.
Of course, yeah.
So there was a certain amount of muck, and one of the lads said on the plane he was going to organise a whip around to buy the jerseys.
Yeah.
But when we got into Dublin Airport, they must have had to change of heart, because my mother was waiting at the airport with my uncle. My father had died just a couple of months previous. Pity he wasn't around to see it. But moving on from that, they opened this wicker basket about the size of the table, half size of the table, and then they say O'Carroll, and literally just threw it. And it was terrible, because you're in the middle of the arrivals. It's only a smaller airport then, and people coming all around the place, and you're being just handed your jersey, you know. So like a lot of it was very, but look, that's nothing in comparison to what even some of the senior players had to put up with. Like we heard all about it, like the way things were ran. It's only when Giles come in and made them look like a bit of a professional outfit, you know. There's a lot of stories like that, but not much had changed. I used to think it was just the youth that were getting treated like that. But when you hear some of the senior players, the way they were treated,
and the women's team as well,
and like having to change in tile, it's like, you know, like these were diabolical things, like, you know. I mean, it was only when Johnny Giles came in, Barry, and started making them look like a professional outfit, you know. I mean, there was times there where no matter what size you were, your jersey was just large. Seriously, for the senior team. And there was a little winger, Joe Haverty, and he was very low sized. But they used to say his jersey used to be like a skirt, they said. It'd be down nearly around his knees. Like there was no professionalism.
And it was Giles who brought that in.
Oh, Giles, listen, I couldn't speak highly enough of the way he turned around. Maybe not results wise, but certainly in regards to making them look like a professional outfit. Like when they'd come to their matches, they'd travel on the bus, they'd all have their gear, they'd have their tracksuits, they look like a professional outfit. Like prior to that, it was very hit and miss. Like you had players coming over from England on the boat, and sometimes they wouldn't make it, and then that's why if you look through a lot of the teams, the international teams, particularly in the 60s, late 50s, you see a lot of League of Ireland players getting called up because some of the English players wouldn't have made it. You could get a call at 12 o'clock to say you're in the team for 3 o'clock that day in Dalymount. So if you go through some of the international, you'll see it, the likes of Jackie Hennessy, Freddie Strachan, Frank O'Neill, they all got called in to make up for others that couldn't make it, you know.
So obviously you've been mentioned there about the international team, so I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise, and interestingly I got the idea from John Giles. He was on Off the Ball recently, and he named his all-time Ireland 11, so I'm going to ask you to do the same, and there might be some players that a lot of people watching this might never have even heard of. So and you're going to use the W formation, aren't you, to do this?
I am, because that's the one I'm used to, obviously, you know, because I think it's simpler, because you just go from 1 to 11. There's no 26 or 27. Funny enough, I just jotted down a few names because I'm at that stage in life where I have to write things down, you know. So listen, I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah, so
but the thing is, it's like somebody asks you, what's the best player you ever seen?
Yeah.
And like straight away I could say Pelé, right? But then what I'm coming to is, in that position he was the best player. So it's very difficult, like, to pick somebody that was exceptional. You could say George Best was a brilliant winger. He was good in that position. Yeah. So you know, and everybody's team is different. So like,
so when I picked
out,
isn't it? Well,
you know, I couldn't believe players that I had to leave out.
Yeah. Well, we'll touch on that. So let's start. Goalkeeper.
I lashed through it, right?
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit why you picked each player.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and go through. I have Alan Kelly Senior in goal, because he played in the early 60s, and he would have nothing like the defence that you see out in Italy or you see in America in front of him. And he had to be good. But he was a brilliant goalkeeper. He was actually with Preston North End. I move on to the two full-backs now, Barry. I have Shea Brennan and I have Tony Dunn. Two rocks, both Manchester United players, like good, sturdy full-backs, and had the capabilities of overlapping as well. Like they could come up and play as wingers. The most difficult part of this team I found was the middle of the park. I have Johnny Giles, right half. Don't need to say too much about him, Leeds United. I have Paul McGrath at centre half, because again, he was a rock, sturdy, and he'd put his head in where others only dared to go. And I have Liam Brady for his footballing skills as left half. So up front, Barry, the 5 forwards, I'd had Steve Highway at outside left. Again, old style winger. I've Robbie Keane at inside left. I've Don Givens as centre forward. And the reason I have Don Givens is he was the most underrated centre forward I think that ever played for Ireland. He done everything right as a centre forward. Just he hadn't got the players around him to feed off him. He'd had an ability, and he had the ability to score goals. And I remember going to see him in one match, I think they played Russia. He scored a hat-trick. Actually, Liam Brady made his debut that day for Ireland.
Right.
Yeah, it was a real winter's afternoon, and against all the odds, Ireland trounced them 3-0. Inside right, I've Ray Houghton. Now, the reason I have Ray Houghton and Robbie Keane up there with Shaker, they would be great for picking up the crumbs off Don Givens. Like, he would be doing everything right, and they would have the ability to feed off him and put the ball in the back of the net. And outside right, not a lot of people would have remembered him. It's going back. I have Joe Haverty. He was a real little ball player, as we call it, combo player. And he'd be out on the wing. He played for Arsenal, and he got plenty caps for Ireland on the wing. But there were two, both Haverty and Highway were two old-style type wingers, you know.
And what I'm interested in, and a lot of people are going to notice that the players who aren't in the team. I mean, there's one glaring one.
Before you even ask, I'm going to tell you.
Go on.
Roy Keane.
Yeah.
I actually had forgotten about him, Barry.
Right.
So I have him down as a reserve.
Right.
My difficulty was, I don't know, I would have had to leave out either Liam Brady or Johnny Giles. And it's now that you pointed it out to me. In hindsight, I might have stuck him in instead of Liam Brady.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now that I have time to think about it.
And two very different players.
Yeah, but no, I'm going to stick with the original 11 and I leave Roy Keane as...
Okay. And any others that might have just missed the cut who you'd like to have on your bench?
Oh God, yeah. Well, there's Charlie Hurley, who was a centre half for Sunderland, and he was a rock. Like, you know, he was, like, they used to call him the King of Roker, like Roker Parker's restaurant, and he was known as the King. Then there was Noel Cantwell. Like, these were tough men and tough players. They had to be, because of the conditions we're playing, like the state of the pitches, type of football. And like, whereas now you can really zone in on your skills with the modern pitches and the modern footballs, you know. You look at the likes of Messi, Ronaldo and all these, like, they can really show off their skills because of the conditions of the pitches and the footballs that they're playing with now, you know.
Yeah. And okay, so just, you know, we're kind of near the end now, and I suppose it's kind of a very sad week in Ireland, isn't it, that we lost Jack Charlton only a few days before we recorded this interview. And I mean, I've great memories of going to matches with you. I always remember when I'd come out of school, if I'd see you across the road leaning against the wall with the jersey on, that meant you'd gotten tickets that morning and we were off to Lansdowne Road. And what do you think his legacy is in Ireland? What's his greatest contribution? What will he be most remembered for?
Again, the professionalism he brought to the international team. And he was a no-nonsense kind of manager, and like, you just couldn't speak highly enough of him in regards to, like, he was a one-track mind, and that was it. It was either his way or the highway, and he proved that his way was successful. That's the way they had to play to qualify.
And he got a lot of criticism, didn't he?
Oh yeah, myself included. And because I thought they were capable of playing better football.
You had the likes of Brady and O'Leary and that.
Yeah,
didn't really...
well, this is it. But that's what I said. That's the way it is with managers. I mean, I gave an example there where I wasn't the kind of player that the manager of the youths was into, and I could see the right, and that can happen with everybody. I mean, there's a couple of players that left Ireland with a sour taste when Charlton came in as manager. Like, you know, I mean, there was no mercy. Like, he just pulled Brady off, and that was the end of his career, you know.
We were at that game, I think.
In the middle of a match, like, he just off, and that was it. And there was one or two others. I know there was a fullback, I can't think of his name now. Davy Langan,
Yeah.
like he felt he got a very raw deal. I don't know about the rights and the wrongs of that, and he hit on hard times. Again, he wasn't very well looked after by the FAI, but that's another story. But you're talking about Sheridan, so he turned him into a very professional outfit. He knew what to do to get the results, to get us to qualify. And he actually gave the country a lift. It's not that the 80s, it was a rough time, right? It was a huge recession, unemployment was rampant, and they needed something. And that was the vacuum that he filled in,
Yeah.
And he was, as I said, he was just a no-nonsense kind of manager. I often feel, I've one regret. I often feel that when we played Italy in the quarter-final, that we had the beatings of that Italian team. And it's just a personal thing. I often feel that if he had went away from the format of the type of football he was playing and allowed the players to play football, I think we could have beaten Italy on that night in particular.
And they could play, because I remember the Soviet Union game, they played them also. England at Wembley.
Yeah, exactly.
The
thing is, the players were there. When you look through that team that went out to play Italy, man for man, when you go through them, Kevin Morgan, Ray Houghton, like fantastic players.
Yeah.
Capable of playing football.
Yeah.
But look at that spilt milk. The thing is, he achieved as much as he could with the players he had.
Yeah.
And he turned the fortunes of the FAI around.
Yeah.
You often wonder what went wrong, don't you?
Yeah. And I mean, talking about just to move on, we're nearly there now. Obviously, Ireland have a new manager now, Stephen Kenny, and what do you think of him? Do you think, and he seems to want to get them playing a bit of football.
There's no doubt about that. His agenda is football. He wants the team to actually play football. He wants to get away from that mindset of keep it in the air, the philosophy of they can't score once it's in the air, and kick and rush. He wants them to play football.
And you're hopeful he'll be successful?
Oh, I'm praying that he's successful. There's nothing like a successful Ireland team. You can see that through the charting years. I have a slight question mark. I think, again, it's like everything. You see great club players, but when they step up to international level, they can not perform.
Yeah, and it's often said for years in Ireland, we don't have the players to do that. Would you subscribe to that?
At times we hadn't got the players. I think the Charlton era, he had the players. As I'm going back to, as I said, he had that match against Italy. I haven't got the team in front of me now because this is an off-the-cuff interview. But I remember going through the players that played that night. And I said that team was capable of playing really good football if they had have gone out with that mindset. But then, look, it all happened so quick. Within 15, 20 minutes, goal down.
Yeah.
Scalacci, I always remember him,
we should have beat them that night. I remember, didn't?
Yeah.
Aldridge had a great shot,
second
and
half.
Quinn had a great effort.
There's times we weren't actually playing them off the pitch, football-wise, which is unusual now against an Italian team.
Yeah.
But you always knew with the Italian teams, maybe it's the mindset. It was always the same. Once Italy went the goal up, that was it. They just shut up shop. You could be playing till the dogs come home. Once they went the goal in front, it's the same with their club teams back then.
Yeah.
Once they went the goal in front, the match was over. They had this ability to just shut you out.
And the kind of the last thing I'll ask about is you spoke about some of the highlights from the League of Ireland and when the League of Ireland team beat England. What are some of the highlights from watching the international team?
Oh my God. I think I'm going back now. I think one of the highlights was when Ireland beat Russia 3-0 and Liam Brady made his debut. That was a great day. Prior to that, we were very close to qualifying. Very few people realise we were very close to qualifying for the World Cup in the mid-60s. And if my memory's serving right, we only had to play Spain. And Spain beat us away. And then they came to Dublin. It wasn't done on goal difference. It was just 3 points for your win. And when they came to Dublin, Dalymount was packed. And we beat Spain 1-0. And it had to go to a playoff. And they were deciding where they'd have the playoff. And it transpired that the playoff was going to be in France. Now, there was always rumours and counter-rumours of that the FAI sold out on that game. That they got money for allowing the match to be played in France, because when the Irish team came out on the pitch, I remember listening to the radio commentary. It was all Irish support, all Spanish supporters, because everything closed down on a Wednesday in Spain.
Right.
So the place, it was like a home game for Spain. I think Spain went down to win 3 or 4-0 or 4-1 or something like that, you know. So I always felt that game was a sellout.
Yeah.
And we actually became very close. Would you believe if we had it qualified, that I think it might have been the European Nations Cup then. I'm not sure it was the European Nations. No, it could have been the World Cup.
Yeah.
I think it was the World Cup, because 66 then was the World Cup. Yeah, it would have been the World Cup. But look at...
And what about in more recent years, anything you remember, the Charlton years in particular? What would stand out? I mean, there's obvious ones.
Oh, well, there's obvious ones.
And I remember you celebrating when we beat England in Stuttgart. I was about 7 or 8. I'll never forget it.
Running around like a madman, yeah. No, they were great wins. I think, again, I go back to that Italian match. I think we played great football that night. That sticks out in my mind. And of course, there's so many of the other stands you under the Charlton area, like, you know. And even in the qualifying ones, even against Malta, like, to see John Aldridge scored a couple of goals and then we're through, like, to actually qualify.
And one memory I have is my first game. You brought me to see Ireland play Tunisia. And it was in October '88. I looked it up before I came, and John Aldridge, I think he'd been struggling to score for Ireland, and he scored. And he scored in that game.
But your granny would have scored that day. It was put on a play for him, Bertie, you know.
And I think Steve Staunton made his debut.
That's right. That's right.
And then the second game you brought me to was Ireland against France in Dalymount, and I saw Liam Brady nearly score one of the best goals I've ever seen, and Andy Townsend made his debut, and Laurent Blanc made his debut for France. Yeah, and it was the lashing rain in Dalymount Park. There two I remember.
The things I done for you, Barry.
Yeah, there you go.
Standing in the
and you know what's interesting? That I ended up marrying a French woman whose parents live in Tunisia. So those two countries were to...
Well, I won't hold that against you.
You know, so...
I won't hold that against you.
That's so listen, that's been... I've learned a lot.
Good, I hope so.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I think the people who'll be listening to that will have found it very interesting, and hopefully it'll maybe bring back some memories from people as well who watch football at the same era. So as Bill O'Carroll, he would have said, we'll leave it there. So thanks a million for talking to me.
You're more than welcome. I actually enjoyed the interview.
Yeah, so did I, and I think
you brought me down memory lane, you know.
Yeah, and it's a nice record to have, and I think you know, I think people at home will have found it interesting. So thanks a million.